The last light of the dying sun bled through the cracked window of our pack house, staining the treaty papers on the table the color of old rust. Or maybe it was blood. They might as well have been. Every word on that parchment was a death sentence for us, dressed up in formal ink and royal seals. I stood in the doorway, my fingers digging into the splintering wood of the frame. It was the only thing holding me up. The air smelled of dust, despair, and my grandfather's fading hope. "Read it again," I whispered. My voice was a thin, frayed thread in the heavy silence. Grandfather's hands, once so strong they could shape iron, trembled as he lifted the page. The royal seal of the Shadowfen Kingdom glared up at us, a predator's mark. His voice, the voice that had told me bedtime stories and sung our pack's history, cracked on the very first line. "By decree of His Majesty Kalen Blackwood, Alpha King of the Northern Reaches, the Moonfall Pack is hereby found in violation of the Treaty of the Whispering Stones, having failed to provide the required tribute for 3 consecutive harvest seasons." We had nothing to give. The words tore from me, sharp with the anger born of helplessness. The blight took our crops. The river fever took our hunters. What were we supposed to offer? The bones they left behind? "The law does not measure suffering, Ilara. It only measures obedience." Grandfather set the paper down as if it burned him. I saw it then, tracks of clean skin through the grime on his face. He had been crying. My rock, my foundation, was weeping. "The penalty is dissolution. By the next full moon, Moonfall ceases to exist. Our lands are forfeit. Our people, scattered to the winds. Refugees if other packs will take them. If not..." He didn't need to finish. I knew. If not, they would be outcasts, prey. I crossed the room and sank to my knees beside his chair, clutching his hands. They were cold. Through the thin walls, I could hear the sounds of our home, what was left of it. The murmur of voices in the square, the crying of a hungry baby, the tired clang of the blacksmith's hammer. 43 souls. That was all that remained of a pack that had once sung under 1,000 moons. 43 people who looked to the blood of the Moonshadow line, to Grandfather, and to me for salvation. "There has to be another way," I breathed, the words a prayer. He didn't speak. His tired, watery eyes drifted to a second document on the table. This one was edged in black. I had refused to touch it since the royal emissary, Lord Vexus, delivered the king's judgment 3 days ago. I could still smell his cloying perfume, see his reptilian smile. "The Alpha King is not without mercy," Vexus had said, his gaze slithering over me like something unclean. "He understands circumstances. He is prepared to offer a full pardon, your debts erased, your sovereignty restored, your pack spared." In exchange for what? Grandfather had asked, though we both already knew. Vexus's smile widened. "The Moonshadow line carries old magic. Ilara is 19, unmated, pure. His Majesty requires a bride. If she weds him before the next full moon, your pack will be spared." The memory of Grandfather's shattered face haunted me. "Absolutely not," he'd said. "We will find another way." But there was no other way. 3 days of frantic searching, of begging, of scraping together every last bit of pride and bargaining chip we had left. Every path led to the same cliff's edge. Moonfall was dying, and I was the only rope. "Grandfather," I said, squeezing his hands, "tell me about him, the truth, not the campfire stories to scare children." He was silent for a long time, staring at a past I couldn't see. When he finally spoke, it was to the gathering shadows in the corner of the room. "Kalen Blackwood took the onyx throne 15 years ago. He was 20. His father was a creature of nightmare, mad with power and cruelty. Kalen challenged him during the Blood Moon ceremony. He killed him, in front of every alpha in the northern reaches. A chill that had nothing to do with the evening air crept down my spine. Patricide, the ultimate sin, the unforgivable crime. He has ruled with an iron fist ever since, grandfather continued, his voice hollow. They call him the King of Ashes. They say his heart is a burnt-out cinder. They say he shows no mercy. They say... He shook his head, finally looking at me. They say he keeps the skulls of his enemies in his throne room, that the shadows themselves obey him. Some of it is gossip. Some of it is probably true. Has he killed innocents? I asked directly. I do not know. His honesty was a blade to my chest. I know he's ruthless. I know those who oppose him vanish. I know the last alpha who dared to question his rule was found torn apart on his own border, his pack symbol crushed under a black boot. I stood and walked to the window. Outside in the dusty square, I saw my younger sister, Lyra. She was laughing, chasing a toddler. At 17, she still had hope. She still believed grandfather would fix everything, like he always had. The courier leaves at dawn. If I am going to accept, it must be tonight. Ilara, please, grandfather began. How long? I interrupted, my back to him. How long? His silence was its own answer. I turned. How long? Sunrise, he whispered, the word a death knell. Lord Vexus said if you agree, the ceremony must be at sunrise. The Alpha King is already en route to the Whispering Stones. You would meet him at the ancient altar at dawn. My legs buckled. I caught myself on the windowsill. Tomorrow? They expected me to marry a monster tomorrow? It is a power play, grandfather said, struggling to his feet. They want you terrified, off balance, with no time to think or flee. Calen Blackwood does not make offers, child. He makes decrees, and he destroys those who hesitate. Then I will not hesitate. The words left my lips, calm and final. I walked to him and cupped his beloved, wrinkled face. You have protected me my whole life. Let me protect you now. Let me protect all of them. He will break you, Ilara. A fresh tear escaped his eye. That man, he consumes light. He will snuff yours out. Maybe, I said, and I tried to smile. It felt like a crack in clay. Maybe my light is stronger than he knows. The night was a thief, stealing the hours away. I found Lyra on the slanted roof of our cottage, her knees drawn to her chest, staring at the stars as if she could find answers written in their cold, distant light. She didn't turn as I climbed up beside her. She didn't need to. You're going to do it. Her voice was flat. Not a question, a sentence. Yes, I'm coming with you. You will stay here. I settled beside her, our shoulders touching like they had since we were children sharing a bed, whispering secrets in the dark. You will help grandfather. You will take care of our people. And you will remember that whatever happens to me, it was my choice. Lyra grabbed my hand, her grip fierce enough to bruise. You're the bravest person I know. I'm the most terrified person you know, I corrected, a hollow laugh escaping me. I'm just better at hiding it. We sat in silence as the moon, a sharp silver claw, climbed higher. I tried to memorize everything, the scent of wood smoke and kine, the distant howl of a lone wolf that was probably just the wind, the warm, solid feel of my sister beside me. By sunrise, all of this would be a memory, a ghost I carried in my heart. Tell me something, Lyra whispered, her head leaning against mine. Do you think the stories are true about what he is? I had heard the whispers that Calen Blackwood wasn't just an alpha, that he was something older, something that had walked the earth when the forests were young and dark, a spirit of vengeance given flesh. I don't know, I admitted, my throat tight. I suppose I'll find out. The hours before dawn were a strange, stretched-out nightmare. I bathed in cold water, scrubbing my skin as if I could wash away my fate. I put on the only formal gown I owned, my mother's dress. The fabric was a deep, dusky blue, like the sky just before night winds, and it smelled faintly of lavender and memory. I braided my dark hair in the intricate style of an unmated female, but instead of flowers, I wove in slender, silver-gray leaves of moonwort, a bride's herb, for protection, for clarity, or perhaps just for courage. Grandfather insisted on coming, along with 6 of our remaining hunters as witnesses. We traveled in a silence so thick it felt like another presence among us. The path to the Whispering Stones was ancient, worn smooth by generations of paws and feet. The forest grew darker, the trees older, their branches twisted into shapes that seemed to watch us pass. The sacred grove appeared suddenly, a bowl of pure silver moonlight in the heart of the black woods. Mist clung to the ground, swirling around monoliths of ancient rune-carved stone that formed a silent circle. And at the center, standing before the largest altar stone, as still as the monoliths themselves, was a figure that made the breath freeze in my lungs. Calen Blackwood. He was taller than any man I had ever seen, his shoulders impossibly broad. He wore armor of polished obsidian that seemed to drink the moonlight rather than reflect it. No crown, but his hair, black as a raven's wing, fell to his shoulders. Even from this distance, I could see the sharp, unforgiving planes of his face. Handsome in the way a sharp blade is beautiful. Utterly cold. But it was his stillness that terrified me. He didn't fidget, didn't acknowledge our arrival with so much as a flicker of his eyes. He simply was, a monument to absolute power, and the air around him felt heavy, charged, and difficult to breathe. "Merciful moon," one of our hunters breathed, the prayer barely audible. From the shadows between 2 stones, Lord Vexus materialized, his smile a gash in his pale face. "His Majesty awaits his bride. Ilara Moonshadow, approach the altar." My feet were roots sunk deep into the earth. This was my last chance to run, to scream, to refuse. I looked at Grandfather, saw his face crumbling, and for one wild, traitorous moment, I considered it. I could flee into the forest. I could disappear. Then Calen Blackwood's head turned. His gaze found mine across the clearing, and my heart stuttered to a stop. His eyes were not silver like the stories said. They were mercury, liquid, metallic, and alive with a cold inner light that had nothing to do with the moon. They were the eyes of a primordial creature, not a man, and they pinned me where I stood with the weight of a mountain. Then he spoke. His voice was deep, resonating not just in my ears, but in the very bones of the earth beneath my feet. It was the sound of stone grinding against stone, of ice cracking over a deep, dark lake. "Come here." 2 words. A command, not an invitation. My legs moved without my permission, carrying me forward across the treacherous ground. Each step was a step away from everything I was, everything I knew, toward a man who looked like he had never known a single moment of warmth in his entire existence. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. He towered over me, and I could see the fine network of pale scars that marked the skin near his temple, the line of his jaw. These were not the scars of accident. They were the maps of 100 battles. "You're younger than I expected." His metallic gaze swept over my face, assessing, calculating. "How old?" 19. My voice was steadier than I felt. A small victory. Something flickered in his expression, too fast to decipher. You're old enough to know what you're agreeing to. Old enough to save my pack from extinction. The words came out sharper than I intended. I was tired of being a pawn, a victim. If I was to chain myself to this man, I would do it with my spine straight. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Behind him, Vexus cleared his throat. His Majesty, if we may proceed. I am speaking to my bride. Kaelin didn't look away from me, but the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vexus fell silent, chastened. Kaelin studied me for another long, unbearable moment. "You're afraid," he stated, his voice devoid of mockery. It was a simple fact. "But you're standing here anyway. You know why. Tell me." "Moonfall falls if I refuse." "Moonfall is already falling." His words were brutally honest. "Your pack hangs by a thread. One harsh winter, one more sickness, and they are gone regardless of today. So I ask again, why are you really standing here?" The question shattered my rehearsed answers. I stared up into those impossible eyes, and the truth spilled out, raw and unvarnished. "Because I will not let them fall alone, because they are my family, because I am all they have left." For a heartbeat, just one, the merciless metal in his gaze seemed to soften, to become something almost human. He searched my face, and I held my breath. "Then understand this," he said, his voice dropping so low only I could hear. "Once we speak these vows, you belong to me, not as a bargaining chip, not as a trophy, as my queen, in the eyes of every pack, every kingdom, every ancient law that matters. There is no going back, no escape. You will be queen of Shadowfen, and that title is stained with blood. Do you understand?" "I understand. No," he said, and his hand came up, not to strike, but to gently tilt my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze fully. His touch was not cold, it was searing, like touching a brand that had just been pulled from the fire. "You don't, but you will." Before I could process the heat of his fingers, he released me and turned to the altar. "Begin." Lord Vexus unrolled a scroll with a flourish that felt obscene in this sacred place. His voice echoed, tinny and false against the ancient stones. "By the authority vested by the Council of Alphas, witnessed by the Moonfall Pack, we call upon the old laws to bind these two souls." I didn't hear the words. My skin still burned where Kaelin had touched me. A strange, deep warmth was spreading from that point, settling in my chest like a banked fire. "Kaelin Blackwood, Alpha King of Shadowfen, do you claim this woman as your mate and queen?" "I claim her." His voice held no hesitation, no emotion. It was a statement of fact, as immutable as the stones around us. "Elara Moon Shadow, last daughter of the Moonfall line, do you accept this claim and bind yourself to his rule?" This was the precipice, the point of no return. Behind me I heard grandfather's sharp, indrawn breath, a sound of pure grief. I looked at Kaelin's broad, unyielding back. I thought of Lyra's laugh. I saw the 43 faces of my people in my mind. "I accept." The words left my lips and hung in the misty air. Kaelin turned. In one swift motion, he drew a dagger from his belt. The blade was dark, etched with runes that seemed to move in the low light. He scored the blade across his own palm. Dark blood welled, shockingly red against his pale skin. "Old vows," he said, his mercury eyes locking with mine, "sealed in old blood." Before I could react, he caught my wrist. His grip was firm, but not cruel. The dagger flashed again, a sharp, bright pain across my palm. I gasped. Then he pressed our bleeding hands together, his fingers lacing through mine. The moment our blood mingled, the world exploded. It wasn't pain, it was a recognition, a surge of power, ancient and wild, roared up my arm and slammed into my chest. I staggered, but Kalen's grip held me upright. Visions, sensations, emotions that were not my own flooded my mind. A boy, no older than 10, hiding in a darkened hallway, hands over his ears to block out screams. A throne room, lit by guttering torches, a man with a twisted face and a crown too heavy for any head. The sickening crunch of bone, the taste of copper and victory, the overwhelming weight of a crown being placed on his head. And beneath it all, a loneliness so vast, so absolute, it was like staring into the starless void between worlds. Then it was over. I stumbled back, dizzy, my palm throbbing where it was pressed to his. The cut was already closing, knitting together with impossible speed. I could feel his heartbeat through the contact, a strong, steady rhythm that somehow synced with my own frantic patter. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "The bond," he said, his own voice rough, strained. He looked as shaken as I felt. "It is done. You are mine now." Vexus was staring, his face a mask of shock. The blood bond? It manifested? So strongly? Majesty, this is... Dismissed. He didn't look at him. His eyes were still on me, searching. "All of you, return to Ashwood and inform the pack their sovereignty is restored. The queen comes with me, now." Grandfather took a faltering step forward. "Your Majesty, please, a moment to say goodbye." "She has already said her goodbyes." Kalen's gaze finally left me, pinning Grandfather in place. His voice lost its strained edge, turning to frost. "Or did you think I wouldn't know? That I wouldn't smell her tears on the wind from miles away? Hear her sister's heart breaking?" He looked back at me. "You are brave, little wolf, or foolish. I haven't decided." "Let me embrace my family," I said, finding my voice. It was steadier than I expected. 5 minutes. Surely even a king can spare that. Something dangerous flickered in his mercury eyes. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse, thought he'd toss me over my shoulder and carry me off like a prize. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, it was an acknowledgement. 5 minutes, he agreed, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Then we ride for the Obsidian Fortress. Do not make me come looking for you." He released my hand and stepped back. The loss of contact felt suddenly cold. My legs were weak, my head spinning. Grandfather caught me in a fierce hug that smelled of herbs and home and desperate love. "If he hurts you," Grandfather began, his voice cracking. "He won't," I said, and the certainty in my own voice surprised me. The bond was a strange, humming awareness in the back of my mind, a door that had been opened and now showed a sliver of light from the other side. In that flash of his memories, I hadn't seen a monster looking for a victim. I saw a lonely boy who had become a hard man. "I'll find a way to visit," she whispered fiercely. "I don't care about his walls or his rules." "Take care of them," I whispered back, holding her tight. "I love you." The 5 minutes were a lifetime and a heartbeat. When Kalen's shadow fell over us again, I knew my time was up. I turned to face him. He looked uncomfortable, as if this raw display of emotion was a language he didn't speak. "It is time," he said, his voice softer than before. He led me to the edge of the clearing where 2 massive, midnight black stallions waited. He lifted me onto one with an effortless strength that was terrifying, then mounted behind me. I stiffened as his arms came around me to take the reins, caging me against the solid wall of his chest. The strange warmth from his touch returned flooding through my back where we connected. "Relax," his voice rumbled near my ear. "Your fear is a loud noise. It is distracting." "Then perhaps you shouldn't have created a bond that lets you feel it." The retort was automatic. I felt rather than heard a low hum in his chest, not quite a laugh. "Perhaps not," he conceded, "but it is done. Hold on." The horse surged forward, and we plunged into the dark forest, leaving the whispering stones and my old life behind. As we rode, the first hints of dawn began to bleed into the sky ahead, streaks of blood red and sickly gold. "Where are we going?" I asked, the wind whipping the words from my lips. "Home," he said, the word vibrating against my spine. "The Obsidian Fortress. You will be safe there." "Safe from what?" His arms tightened around me, just slightly. "From everything, except me." The Obsidian Fortress did not rise from the mountainside. It erupted from it, a jagged crown of black stone and piercing towers that seemed to claw at the belly of the clouds. It was immense, terrible, and breathtaking. Banners of black and deep crimson snapped in the vicious mountain wind, each bearing his sigil, a snarling wolf's head encircled by thorns. But it was the gates that stole the breath from my lungs and turned my blood to ice. They were massive, wrought in the shape of interlocking fangs, and mounted above them, preserved by some grim magic or macabre art, were 3 skulls. Not clean bone, but mummified, skin stretched tight, expressions frozen in their final moments of agony and defiance. The 3 alphas who had challenged Kaelin Blackwood's rule. A warning carved in flesh and bone. "Don't look." Kaelin's voice was flat behind me. But it was too late. The empty eye sockets seemed to follow me as we passed beneath them, into the shadow of the fortress. "Mercy is a weakness," Kaelin said, as if reading the horror in my rigid posture. "It is the first lesson a king in these territories learns, and the last his enemies forget." The courtyard beyond was a chaotic symphony of purpose. Soldiers drilled, their roars echoing off the stone. Servants scurried. Wolves in both forms moved with a disciplined urgency, and every single one of them stopped and turned as we entered. Hundreds of eyes fixed on us. The weight of their stares was a physical pressure. Kaelin dismounted with that same fluid, predatory grace, then reached up and lifted me down. His hands spanned my waist, and that now familiar searing warmth flared where he touched me. Our eyes met, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker in his mercury gaze. Not possessiveness, but something like recognition of the strange current that flowed between us. He turned to face the assembled crowd, and his voice, when he spoke, carried with an alpha's command that needed no shout. "My people." The word rolled over the courtyard, silencing every sound. "I present to you Elara Blackwood, your queen." The reaction was instantaneous. As one, the entire courtyard dropped to a knee, heads bowed. The sound of hundreds of knees hitting stone was a thunderclap of submission. My heart hammered against my ribs. Queen? The title was a foreign weight, an ill-fitting cloak. "Rise," Kaelin commanded. To me, he said quietly, "Come, you need rest, and we need to talk." He led me through a labyrinth of corridors, each more imposing than the last. I caught glimpses of armories glittering with steel, libraries that vanished into shadowy heights, halls large enough to hold my entire pack 10 times over. This was not a home, it was the heart of an empire, and it beat with a cold, martial rhythm. Finally, we reached a set of double doors carved with wolves running under a full moon. He pushed them open. The room beyond was vast, beautiful, and utterly forbidding. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a dizzying panorama of mountains and endless sky. A fire crackled in a hearth large enough to roast an ox, but it did little to dispel the inherent chill of the black stone. The bed was a massive thing of dark wood and charcoal silks. Tapestries depicting epic, bloody battles covered the walls. It was a room fit for a warlord's consort. "Your chambers," Kalen said, watching my face. "They connect to mine through that smaller, reinforced door." He gestured to a smaller, reinforced door on the far wall. "You will need attendants. I will send Marin. She has served this house before I took the throne. She will guide you." "And what is my purpose here?" I turned to face him, exhaustion making me bold. "To look pretty? To be a symbol? What do you expect from your political purchase?" His jaw tightened. "You are my queen. That is your purpose." "It means nothing unless you tell me what it means." I took a step toward him, craning my neck to hold his gaze. I felt it. At the stones. That connection. What was that? For the first time, he looked uncertain. He turned away, moving to stare out at the merciless mountains. "The blood bond is ancient magic. It ties mates together, allows us to sense each other, to share strength. It's meant to forge an unbreakable alliance." "And you didn't think to warn me before slicing my hand open?" "Would it have changed your answer?" He glanced back, his profile sharp against the gray light. "You were always going to say yes, for your pack, for your family. Do not pretend otherwise." He was right, and I hated him for it. "So now we're connected, and I have no say in it." "You had a say." His voice dropped again, turning cold. "You said, 'I accept.' Everything else is consequence." My temper, frayed by fear and the long journey, finally snapped. "Then tell me the consequences. Tell me what to expect from a husband who mounts skulls on his gates. Tell me if I should be sleeping with a dagger into my pillow. Tell me if I should be afraid of you." The silence that followed was so deep I could hear the crackle of the fire across the enormous room. Kalen stared at me, emotions I couldn't name warring in his eyes. Finally, he crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, stopping so close I had to tilt my head back. "Yes," the word was soft, deadly serious. "You should be afraid of me. I have ended lives for a whispered insult. I have erased packs from the map for a moment's defiance. I am exactly what the stories say, Ilara, a monster wearing a crown." "Then why," the question escaped me before I could cage it, "why do I feel safe with you?" He went utterly still. "What?" "I can feel you." I pressed a hand to my chest where that new awareness hummed. "Through this bond, and you're not what you pretend to be. You're angry. You're so lonely, and you're—" "Careful." His voice was a low warning. "You are seeing what you wish to see." "Am I?" I held my ground, even as every instinct screamed to retreat. "Then prove it. Show me the monster. Make me afraid." It was a challenge, and no alpha could ignore a challenge. His eyes flashed, the mercury brightening to a molten, luminous silver. His hand shot out, but not to strike me. He caught a loose strand of my hair, the one woven with moonwort, and rubbed it between his fingers. When he spoke, his voice had changed. It was layered, rougher, as if something else spoke with him. "You want to see the monster." The air grew colder. "You want to know what I really am."
"Yes," his eyes blaze. "I am not just an alpha, Ilara. I am a Blackwood. My bloodline is cursed. We do not just command wolves. We carry the spirit of the first wolf, the shadow that hunts. It is a darkness that lives in our veins. My father was consumed by it. He became the monster you have heard of." He leaned closer, and I could see his canines were longer, sharper. "And this bond you feel with a true Blackwood king, it is not a gentle thing. It is a chain, a tether. I can feel your every flicker of emotion, and in time, you will feel it too. The hunger, the rage, the endless cold shadow." His thumb brushed my lower lip, and a jolt like static shot through me. "The hunger for what?" I breathed. His gaze dropped to my throat, and for a terrifying, thrilling second, I thought he would bite me. For strength, for light, for the warmth that has been absent from this fortress for 100 years. He straightened abruptly, releasing the strand of my hair as if it burned him. The inhuman light in his eyes dimmed, the sharpness of his teeth receding. He took a step back, running a hand through his dark hair, his expression one of genuine struggle. "This is why I try to keep my distance on the ride," he said, his voice rough again. "The bond makes control difficult. It makes me want things I have no right to want." I touched my lips, still tingling. "What if I want them too?" "Don't." The word was a plea. "Don't say that. You're 19. You're innocent. You've been thrust into a nightmare. I will not be the villain who takes advantage of that." "I am your wife," I said, my voice shaking, "and I am not as innocent as you think. I understand duty. I understand alliance." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You understand nothing, little wolf, nothing of the shadow that wants to claim you, nothing of what it means to be bound to a creature like me." Before I could respond, a sharp, urgent knock shattered the tense silence. Kalen's head snapped toward the door, his kingly mask slamming back into place. "Enter." A man with hair the color of iron and eyes the gray of a storm slid into the room. His gaze darted to me, widening slightly before fixing on Kalen. "Your Majesty, my queen, forgive the intrusion. Riders from the northern border. There's been an incident." Kalen's posture changed instantly, becoming all lethal focus. "Explain, Torin." "A contingent of Lord Vexus's personal guard crossed into our territory. They claim it was a navigation error, but—" Torin's eyes flicked to me again, and his meaning was clear. They were asking questions about the new queen, the human bride from a dying pack. Ice flooded my veins. Why would they care about me? "Because word is spread," Torin said, his voice grim. "The King of Ashes has taken a mate, and there are those who see a new queen, especially one from a vulnerable line, as the perfect lever to pry apart his kingdom." The air in the room went from tense to lethally still. Kalen didn't move, but I felt the shift in him through the bond, a sudden, focused chill, like the calm before a blizzard. "How many?" His voice was deceptively quiet. 20, maybe 30. Our patrol is holding them at the Filver Creek crossing, but they're outnumbered. They're demanding an audience with the queen." "A trap," I said, the words leaving my lips before I could think. My mind, honed by years of trying to protect a dying pack, saw the shape of it immediately. Kalen's mercury eyes cut to me, assessing. "They've crossed my border and threatened what is mine. I do not hide behind stone walls." "I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to take me with you." "Absolutely not." "I am not a piece of furniture to be left behind for safety." My voice rose, edged with frustration of a lifetime of being told I was too fragile. "I am your queen, by your own decree. If they're using me as a provocation, then my presence changes the game. They expect a furious king. They won't expect a queen standing beside him." Torin, the iron-haired warrior, watched this exchange with a carefully neutral face. "She has a point, Kalen. If their goal is to test your attachment, to find a weakness, showing unity, strength in your pairing, could be the better strategy." I felt the conflict in Kalen, a storm of protectiveness and tactical calculation warring behind his stoic mask. The bond hummed with it. "You don't know how to fight. You've never seen real battle. Then I will learn today," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching, "but I will not learn by cowering here." For a long moment he just looked at me. I saw the ghost of that lonely boy from his memories, the one who had shouldered a kingdom alone. He gave a single curt nod. "You stay at my side. If I give you an order, you obey it without question. If I tell you to run, you run. Do you understand?" Relief and terror washed through me in equal measure. "I understand." "Tormin, ready my personal guard. We ride within an hour, and send Marin to the queen with proper riding leathers, not a gown." Torin bowed and slipped from the room. The silence he left was heavy. Kalen turned back to the window. "This is not a game, Ilara. The Northern Lords are jackals. They'll have weapons tipped with wolfsbane. One scratch and the poison works fast. Even I am not immune to a large enough dose." "Then we must be careful not to get scratched," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. He finally looked at me, and to my shock, I saw a flicker of something like respect in his metallic gaze. "You continue to surprise me, little wolf." Marin arrived moments later, a woman of indeterminate age with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She helped me into supple, dark leather armor that fit surprisingly well. "This was your grandmother's, my lady, the queen before the dark times. She was a warrior too." The words were a balm. I wasn't the first to walk this path. When I emerged, Kalen was waiting, already armed. He handed me a slender, beautifully balanced dagger in a leather sheath, silver-lined. "It will cut through most armor. Use it only if you have to." We rode out with 20 of Kalen's most feared warriors. The journey was a blur of pounding hooves and rushing wind. With every mile, my new senses, hented by the bond or the strange magic of this place, sharpened. I could smell the pine resin and the cold metal of the warrior's armor. I could hear the rustle of creatures in the underbrush leagues away, and I could feel Kalen beside me, a steady, burning presence, his focus absolute, but his worry for me a constant low hum in the back of my mind. We reached the border as the sun began to dip. Silver Creek was a slash of mercury through the dark forest. On our side, a dozen of Kalen's wolves held a defensive line, some in human form, some in beast form, snarling. On the other side, perhaps 30 soldiers in the livery of Lord Vexus's house stood with their weapons drawn and glistening with a sinister purple sheen. Wolfsbane. At their head was not Vexus, but a sneering captain. King Blackwood, how gracious of you to come, and you've brought the little queen. We were just hoping for an introduction. Kalen did not dismount. His voice, when he spoke, carried across the water with deadly calm. You have crossed my border. You have threatened my mate. There is only one outcome for that. Leave now, and I will be merciful. You may keep your lives. The captain laughed. Mercy? From the King of Ashes? We're not here for mercy. We're here for a tribute, a welcoming gift for the new queen. He gestured, and 2 soldiers dragged a bound figure forward, one of Kalen's border scouts, a young wolf, beaten and bleeding. Rage, cold and pure, radiated from Kalen. I felt it through the bond, a wave that made my teeth ache. Let him go, I said, my voice clear and ringing. I didn't know where the courage came from. And you may leave with your lives. That is the only offer on the table. The captain's eyes slid to me, full of mockery. Or what, girl? You'll knit us a threatening sweater?
I saw Kalen's hand tighten on his reins. I acted before he could. I pushed my feelings down the bond, not fear, but calm, deliberate intention. Wait. To my astonishment, I felt his surprise, then his reluctant acknowledgement. He held still. I nudged my horse forward, just 1 step closer to the creek. I am Alara Blackwood, Queen of Shadowfen. You are in my kingdom. You have harmed one of my people. The offer stands. Release him and leave. This is your final chance. Something in my tone, the absolute certainty, made the captain's sneer falter for a second. He looked from me to the immovable, terrifying figure of Kalen. Greed and foolishness won. Take her, he barked. All hell broke loose. Kalen moved like a shadow given form. He was among them before the captain's soldiers could take 2 steps. I lost sight of him in a whirl of black armor and flashing steel. Our guards surged forward with savage cries. Stay here, Torin yelled at me, then joined the fray. But I saw the captain, slinking back, drawing a crossbow. He wasn't aiming at Kalen. He was aiming at the bound, helpless scout on the ground. I didn't think. I kicked my horse forward, leaping the narrow creek. The world narrowed to the captain's finger on the trigger. I threw myself from the saddle, not at him, but at the scout, shoving him sideways as the bolt hissed through the air where his heart had been. We landed in a heap. The captain turned his weapon on me, his face twisted in rage. Meddlesome! A black shape landed between us with a ground-shaking thud. Kalen, in his full, terrifying wolf form, a beast of shadow and muscle larger than any natural wolf. He placed 1 massive paw on the captain's chest, pinning him. The message was clear. The fight was over in minutes. The invading soldiers were disarmed, those who still lived kneeling in terror. Kalen shifted back, not even breathless. He walked to me as I untied the young scout. You disobeyed me, he said, his voice low. I said to stay at your side. I interpreted that as staying in the fight for our side, I said, helping the scout up. My hands were shaking. Kalen looked at the scout, then at the crossbow bolt embedded in a tree trunk. He looked back at me. The storm in his eyes had cleared, replaced by something unreadable. Your interpretation, he said slowly, was correct. He turned to the captured captain. Take a message to your master, Kalen said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried death in every syllable.
The next time he sends men to my border or breathes my queen's name, I will not stop at his soldiers. I will tear the stones of his keep down with my bare hands and bury him in the rubble. Do you understand?" The man could only whimper. As we rode back to the fortress in the twilight, the atmosphere was different. The warriors looked at me with new eyes, not just as their king's burden, but as someone who had jumped into the fray. Kalen rode beside me in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "You saved Onan's life. That scout, his father, was part of my personal guard. He died protecting me years ago." I hadn't known. I had just acted. "He is one of ours. That's all that matters." Kalen glanced at me, and in the dying light, his mercury eyes seemed to hold a warmth I hadn't seen before. "Yes," he said simply, "he is." The days that followed were a whirlwind. The story of the border incident spread through the fortress, transforming me from a curious novelty into a tangible presence. I was no longer just the human bride. I was the queen who had stood with them. Kalen, true to his word, began to include me. Not in everything. The weight of 15 years of solitary rule wasn't shed overnight, but in small ways. I sat in on meetings about grain stores and patrol rotations. I walked the fortress walls with Marin, learning the names of the guards and the history of the towering stones. And I spent hours each day with Torin in a secluded training yard. "Again," he would say, as I picked up the practice dagger for the 100th time, my muscles screaming. "Your mind knew what to do at the creek. Now your body must learn." Kalen often watched these sessions from a shadowed archway, never interrupting, his expression inscrutable. The bond between us had become a constant, quiet hum. I could feel his presence in the fortress like a familiar room nearby. I could sense his simmering anger during council meetings with obstinate nobles, his flicker of dry amusement when I bested Torin in a verbal spar about treaty law, and at night, when the fortress was quiet, a deep, aching loneliness that echoed my own homesickness. One evening, about a week after the border skirmish, I couldn't sleep. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and walked onto my balcony. The mountains were giants, sleeping under a blanket of stars. "You should rest." I didn't jump. I'd felt him approaching. Kalen leaned against the doorway to his chambers, arms crossed. He wore simple, dark trousers and a linen shirt, looking less like a king and more like a man haunted by the quiet of the night. "I was thinking about the bond," I said softly, not turning. "That day at the stones, I saw things, memories that weren't mine." His stillness became profound. "What did you see?" "A boy in a dark hallway, screams, a crown that was too heavy." I finally looked at him, and loneliness so vast it hurt to look at. He flinched, just a tiny movement, but I saw it. He pushed off the doorway and came to stand beside me at the railing, keeping a careful foot of space between us. That is the curse of the Blackwood Kings. The shadow that hunts, it is not just power, it is an isolation. It whispers that everything you touch will turn to ash, that trust is the prelude to betrayal. My father believed those whispers. They drove him mad. "Do you believe them?" He was silent so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "I have spent my reign proving them right. It is easier to be feared than to be betrayed. Safer to be alone than to lose someone." His glaze slid to me. "Until now." My heart stumbled. "Kalen," he continued, his voice rough, "the bond changes things. It is a vulnerability I never wanted. A window into a soul I have spent a lifetime fortifying. And it's a window for you, too. You see the monster, and you see the boy. I don't know which one is more dangerous for you to know." I turned to him fully. "I'm not afraid of the boy, and I'm not afraid of the monster, because I see the man fighting to keep him chained." He shook his head, a bitter smile touching his lips. "You have a defiant heart, Ilara Moonshadow. It will either be your salvation or your ruin." Perhaps it will be yours, I whispered. The air between us crackled. The space of 1 foot felt like a canyon and a hair's breadth at once. He lifted a hand slowly, as if moving through deep water. His fingers hovered near my cheek, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The bond sang, a chord of pure, resonant energy. Then, from the courtyard far below, a shout shattered the moment. A horn blew, 2 short, 1 long, the alarm for a messenger arriving at full speed. The warmth vanished from Kalen's expression, replaced by the cold mask of the king. The moment was gone. "Duty calls," he said, his voice flat. He turned and strode inside.
I followed, my heart still pounding from what had almost happened. Torin met us in the main hall, holding a scroll sealed with wax the color of dried blood. "From the Council of Alphas," Torin said, his face grim. "Summoning you both, a formal inquiry into the border altercation with Lord Vexus's forces. They claim you acted with excessive brutality and are destabilizing the region." Kalen took the scroll, his jaw a hard line. "Vexus is twisting the story. He's using the council to try and leash me." "They're meeting at the Circle of Elders," Torin said, "in 3 days' time. Your presence, and the Queen's, is commanded." A formal inquiry. A council of all the alphas. I would have to stand before them, the human queen from a weak pack, and be judged? Kalen looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine concern in his eyes. Not for his political position, but for me. "You do not have to go. The summons is for me. I can face them alone." "And let them think I'm hiding me? That I'm a secret weakness?" I shook my head, the fear solidifying into resolve. "No, I stand with my king. Let them see us. Let them judge." Torin's mouth quirked. The jackals won't know what hit them. Kalen's gaze held mine. The connection between us thrummed with a new understanding, a shared purpose. Then we prepare for war in a court of words. The Circle of Elders was not a place of stone and mortar, but a vast natural amphitheater carved by ancient glaciers, hidden high in the mountains. It was neutral ground, sacred to all packs. When we arrived with our retinue, it was already filled with the leaders of the northern reaches. I had never felt so exposed. Hundreds of powerful alphas and their betas watched as we descended the narrow path to the stone dais at the center. Their scents, musky, wild, aggressive, washed over me. Their stares were like physical blows. I kept my head high, my hand resting lightly on Kalen's offered arm. He was a bastion of cool, imposing strength beside me, but through the bond, I felt his hyper-vigilance, his readiness for any threat. Lord Vexus was already there, dressed in ostentatious silks, a smug smile on his thin lips. Flanking him were several other alphas from the more prosperous southern territories. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to open contempt. The High Elder, a woman so old her face was a map of wrinkles, but whose eyes shone with fierce intelligence, raised a hand for silence. "King Kalen Blackwood, Queen Alara Blackwood, you were called before this circle to answer the grievance of Lord Vexus of the Silver Plains. He claims your forces attacked his peaceable delegation on a diplomatic mission, slaughtering unarmed men. What say you?" Kalen's voice was calm, clear, and carried to the very back of the circle. "I say Lord Vexus is a liar. His delegation was 30 armed soldiers who crossed a marked border with weapons dipped in wolfsbane. They captured and tortured one of my scouts. They aimed a crossbow at a defenseless prisoner. Is that how the Silver Plains conduct diplomacy, with torture and attempted murder?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some alphas were nodding. Vexus scoffed. "A fantastical story. My men were retrieving a lost hunting party. Your wolf attacked without provocation. And as for this queen," he turned his sneer at me. "A girl from a dust-dry pack, now suddenly giving orders on a battlefield? It's a farce, a desperate play for sympathy. Perhaps she bewitched you, Blackwood. The Moonfall line was always said to have tricky magic."
A hot anger rose in my chest. I felt Kalen's own rage spike, a volcano about to erupt. I squeezed his arm gently. My turn. I stepped forward, just one path. The movement drew every eye. "Lord Vexus," I said, my voice not loud but piercing in the sudden quiet. "You speak of my pack as if it is an insult. We are small, yes, we have suffered, but we have honor, something you seem to have misplaced along with the truth." He blinked, startled by the direct address. "You dare?" "I dare," I cut him off, turning to address the circle. "Elders, alphas, I am new to your ways, but I know what I saw. I saw a young wolf, Eonon, bound and bleeding. I saw a captain with a wolfsbane dagger laughing, and I saw that same captain aim a crossbow at a defenseless prisoner. Is that how the Silver Plains conduct diplomacy, with torture and attempted murder?" The murmurs grew louder. Some alphas were nodding. Vexus sputtered. "You have no proof. It is your word against mine." "I have proof," a voice rang out from the edge of the circle. Torin stepped forward, leading the young scout, Eonon. His face was still bruised, but he stood straight. "I have the testimony of the scout they captured, and I have this." Torin held up the captain's crossbow, the stock still smeared with wolfsbane paste, recovered from the field. Vexus's face went pale. The tide was turning. Then an alpha from the back, a burly man with a scar across his face, spoke. "Even if true, Blackwood, your response was typical, extreme violence. You kill first and never ask questions. This new alliance," he said the word like a curse, "does not change the fact that you are a tyrant who rules by fear. Why should we believe this is anything but another one of your plays for power?" The question hung in the air. It was the real challenge, not about the border, but about Kalen's very nature, about us. Kalen was silent. I could feel the old defenses rising in him, the cold anger, the impulse to lash out, to be the monster they expected. I couldn't let him. I stepped forward again, into the very center of the dais. I felt terribly small, but I opened myself to the bond, letting my sincerity, my determination, flow through it, not just to Kalen, but hoping, somehow, the truth of it would reach the others. "You ask why you should believe," I said to the scarred alpha. "Do not believe the king. Do not believe me. Believe in what you see before you. A king who for the first time in 15 years has brought someone to stand beside him at this circle. A king who did not come here with an army at his back to intimidate you, but with a single scout as his witness. You fear his brutality? So do I. But I have also seen his loyalty to those who are his. I have seen him offer mercy when none was deserved. The King of Ashes you know may be a tyrant, but Kalen Blackwood, my husband, is a man learning to be more." A profound silence fell. No one had ever spoken of Kalen Blackwood like that, as a man, as someone capable of change. The High Elder studied me, then Kalen. Her ancient eyes saw everything. "The bond between you," she said slowly, "it is strong. I can feel its truth from here. It is not a trick." She turned to the circle. "The grievance of Lord Vexus is dismissed. He will pay a blood price in silver to the Shadowfen pack for the harmed scout. But a larger question remains." Her gaze settled on Kalen. "The world is changing, King of Ashes. An alpha who stands alone is strong, but an alpha who stands with a true mate is unstoppable. You have been given a gift you do not deserve. Do not waste it." The inquiry was over. We had won, but as we left the circle, the weight of the elder's words settled on us both. We were no longer just a political arrangement. In the eyes of the packs, we were becoming something real, and that made us more dangerous and more vulnerable than ever. Victory at the Circle of Elders tasted sweet, but it was a fleeting flavor. Back at the Obsidian Fortress, a different kind of tension took root. We had embarrassed Vexus and his allies publicly. Men like that did not forget. The bond between Kalen and I had deepened into something wordless and constant. We no longer needed to be in the same room to be aware of each other. I could feel his focus in the war room as he pored over maps. He could sense my frustration in the library as I tried to untangle the fortress's complex histories. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of the night, I would feel a wave of his loneliness, and without thinking, I would send a pulse of warmth, of solidarity down the bond. I would feel his startled reception, followed by a slow, grateful calm. He began to teach me about the shadow that hunts, not just the family curse, but the power itself. It wasn't evil, he explained one evening in his private study. It was primordial, wild, a force of nature that demanded a vessel of immense will. My father's will broke, Kaelin said, staring into the fire. The shadow consumed him. I have spent my life building a wall around it, containing it. And the bond? I asked. Where does that fit? He looked at me, his mercury eyes glowing faintly in the dark room. The bond is a channel. It connects me to another soul. It stabilizes the current. Before, it was a raging river threatening to overflow its banks. Now it has another path to flow into. It is quieter, more controlled. His words sparked a realization in me. That day at the circle, when I spoke, I tried to push my feelings, the truth I felt, through the bond, not just to you, but outward. Could others have felt it? Is that why the High Elder believed me? Kaelin looked stunned. He leaned forward. What did you do? Ilara, the bond is a private link. It cannot be broadcast. But I felt something, a push, like opening a door. He was silent for a long moment. The moonfall magic, he breathed. Your grandmother's line. They were known as soul weavers, not healers of the body, but of the spirit. They could strengthen pack bonds, foster unity. A new, intense light entered his eyes. What if the bond didn't just share my power with you? What if it awakened yours? The idea was terrifying and exhilarating. I had always been just Ilara. Now I was a queen, a mate, and possibly a vessel for ancient magic of my own. We had no time to explore it further. Torin interrupted, his face graver than I'd ever seen it. Scouts from the far eastern pass, they're not coming back. And the ones who made it back, they're talking about shadows that move against the wind. A cold that kills plants and sours water. Something is coming, Kaelin. Something that isn't Vexus. A new threat, an unknown one. The timing was too perfect. That night I had a dream, or a vision. I stood in the glacier-carved circle of elders, but it was empty and shrouded in mist. From the mist, a figure emerged, not Kaelin, but someone wearing a crown of twisted black antlers. His face was in shadow, but his voice was like grinding stones. The little soul weaver, it whispered. You have anchored the storm. Now I will use you to break the leash. I woke with a gasp, my skin icy cold. The room was dark, but the bond was shrieking with alarm. Not my alarm, Kaelin's. I threw off the covers and ran to the connecting door, throwing it open. Kaelin's room was empty, the window open to the freezing night, and on the floor near the hearth, drawn in what looked like charcoal, was a symbol, a wolf's skull intertwined with thorny vines, the same symbol from my dream. This was no political maneuver. This was an attack, a psychic one, and it had targeted Kaelin through the bond we shared. Just then, a scream echoed from the courtyard below, followed by the clash of steel. The fortress was under attack, not from an army at the gates, from something that had already gotten inside. Chaos. The word did not do justice to the nightmare that unfolded in the bowels of the obsidian fortress. It was not an army that had breached our walls. It was a poison, a whispering, shadowy magic that slithered through the lower corridors, turning trusted guards against each other. Men I had broke fast with that morning now fought their brothers with blank, glowing eyes. The air grew thick and cold, smelling of grave dirt and sour magic. I found Kalen in the great hall, a circle of his most loyal guards around him. His eyes were pure, molten mercury, his canines elongated. The shadow that hunts was close to the surface, a palpable rage vibrating from him, but he was fighting it, holding it back. "Ilara, you should be barricaded in your room," Torin yelled, parrying a blow from a berserk cook. "The attack is inside the walls. There is no safe room," I shouted back, picking up a fallen guard's short sword. It was heavy, alien in my hand. Kalen's gaze snapped at me. Through the bond, I didn't feel his anger at my disobedience, but a surge of fierce, terrified protectiveness. "Stay close." The command echoed in my mind, not as words, but as pure intent. The shadowy magic seemed to coalesce, forming vague humanoid shapes that darted at the edges of the torchlight. Where they passed, torches guttered and died. A cold deeper than winter leached the strength from my limbs. "It's a soul eater," Kalen growled, his voice layered with the growl of the beast. "A dark witch. It's feeding on the fear, turning it into power. That's why it targeted the bond. Our connection is a beacon of strong emotion." As he said it, a particularly dense shadow detached from the wall and shot toward me. It had no face, only two pits of hungry violet light. I froze, the sword useless in my hand against this thing. Kalen moved, but he was too far. The shadow reached for me, and I felt a terrible sucking cold, as if it would pull my very soul from my chest. No. The thought was not mine alone. It was a defiant roar that came from the core of the bond. I didn't raise the sword. I raised my palm out, thinking not of attack, but of connection, of the warmth of the pack, of Lyra's laugh, of grandfather's stories, of Kalen's silent, simmering strength beside me in the council. I thought of the weave of souls that made a pack, that made a family. A light, not the fierce gold of Kalen's power, but a soft, silvery white erupted from my palm. It was the light of a full moon on snow. It didn't burn the shadow, it unwove it. The creature shrieked, a sound of tearing cloth and breaking glass, and dissolved into harmless mist. Everyone in the hall stopped fighting, stunned. Kalen stared at me, his beastly features receding, replaced by pure awe. "Soul Weaver," he breathed. But the victory was short-lived. From the main doors, a figure cloaked in tattered gray robes glided in. The air grew so cold our breath plumed. This was the source. Kalen Blackwood, the anchored storm, and his pretty little anchor. The bond is strong, so much richer to sever. "Who sent you?" demanded Kalen, stepping in front of me. "Vexus, one of the other lords?" The witch chuckled. "They are pawns. They fear the tyrant. My master fears the king and queen. A united Shadowfen is an inconvenience. A bonded Blackwood king with a moon shadow soul weaver at his side is an existential threat." The witch raised a hand, and the shadows in the room coalesced into spears of darkness, aiming at Kalen's heart. He roared, and the shadow that hunts burst forth in a wave of tangible darkness to meet it. The two powers clashed in a maelstrom of pure, destructive force. The fortress itself groaned in protest. I saw it then. The witch was drawing power from the fear and confusion of the mind-controlled warriors. It was a parasite, and Kaelin was fighting it on its own terms, with raw power, which is exactly what it wanted. I had to try something else. I closed my eyes, blocking out the chaos. I found the humming thread of the bond, not just mine and Kaelin's, but the fainter threads of loyalty and pack that connected every wolf in this pack to their king. I reached for those threads with my new sense, the soul-weaving magic. I didn't try to fight the witch's cold. I tried to warm the threads. I poured memories of loyalty, of shared meals, of standing watch together, of the unbreakable trust of the pack. One by one, the blank, glowing eyes of the afflicted guards began to clear. Confusion replaced malice. They lowered their weapons, shaking their heads.
The witch screamed in fury. Its source of food was vanishing. The shadow spears wavered. Kaelin sensed the shift immediately. With a final, tremendous surge, his darkness shattered the witch's attack and slammed into it. The robed figure was thrown back against the wall with a sickening crunch. The unnatural cold vanished. The remaining shadows dissipated like smoke. Silence fell, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of dying torches. Kaelin shifted back to his human form, chest heaving. He walked to the crumpled witch and pulled back the hood. Underneath was a face neither old nor young, pale and utterly alien. It was not a wolf. A void walker, Torin whispered, horrified. A creature from the places between. Someone summoned it, someone with very dark, very old magic. The creature's eyes focused on me with its last breath. The master sees you now, soul weaver. The game has just begun. Then it dissolved into ash. The immediate threat was over, but the warning was clear. We had an enemy who did not play by the rules of alphas and borders, an enemy who knew what I was becoming and saw it as a threat to be eliminated. In the aftermath, as we tended to the wounded, Kaelin found me. He didn't speak, he just pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly against his chest. I could feel his heart hammering, feel the aftershocks of his fear for me vibrating through the bond. He rested his chin on top of my head. "I told you," he murmured into my hair, his voice ragged. "The bond is a vulnerability. It led them right to you." I pulled back just enough to look up at him. "No, the bond is what saved us. My connection to you and to your people is what broke its hold. It's our strength, Kaelin, not our weakness." He searched my face, his mercury eyes full of a turmoil I could now name. It wasn't just fear or anger. It was the terrifying, dawning hope of a man who had lived in darkness, seeing a light he never believed could be for him. "Then we must become stronger," he said, his voice firming with resolve. "Both of us, together, because the next attack will not be with a summoned monster. It will be with an army, and it is coming." The ash of the Voidwalker was swept away, but its warning lingered in the air of the obsidian fortress like a poison. We had been attacked in our very heart. The enemy was no longer a faceless lord or a political rival. It was something ancient, something that knew our deepest secrets, the nature of Kaelin's power, the awakening of my own. In the days that followed, the fortress moved from recovery to preparation with a grim intensity. Kaelin and Torin spent every waking hour in the war room, their maps now marked with troubling reports from every corner of the northern reaches. Crops were failing under a sudden, unseasonal frost in the south. Wolves were vanishing from their territories in the eastern woods, leaving no trace. A creeping, silent dread was spreading. I threw myself into understanding my own magic. With Marin's help, I found crumbling scrolls in the deepest parts of the library that spoke of the Moonshadow Soul Tenders. They were peace weavers, diplomats whose magic could soothe frenzied spirits and strengthen the bonds of kinship.
They had no offensive power, but in a pack, their presence was said to make warriors fight as one mind and healers work twice as fast. My practice was small, quiet. I would sit with the warriors in the mess hall, not speaking, just listening to the hum of their connections to each other, to Kaelin, and when I found a thread frayed by fear or doubt from the attack, I would gently, very gently, pour a little calm into it, a memory of a shared victory, a sense of shared purpose. I could see the change, a squared shoulder here, a deeper laugh there. The fortress, though on edge, began to feel less like a collection of individuals under siege and more like a single, coiled entity. Kaelin felt it too. Through the bond, the constant, grinding pressure of his isolation had eased, replaced by a focused, collective determination. He no longer carried the weight of the kingdom alone. He carried it with them, with me. One evening, he came to my chambers, not through the connecting door, but by knocking on the main entrance. He carried a small, iron-bound chest. "I have something for you," he said, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. He set the chest on my table and opened it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a circlet. It was not the heavy, spiked crown of the King of Ashes. It was made of pale, luminous moonstone, woven in a design of curling vines and tiny, howling wolves. It was elegant, fierce, and unmistakably royal. "This was my grandmother's," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The last true queen of Shadowfen, before the dark times. She was a peacemaker like you. The fortress flourished under her." He finally looked at me, his mercury gaze serious. "You have earned your own crown, Elara, not through marriage, but through loyalty, courage, and the strength you give to others. Will you wear it?" Tears pricked my eyes. This was more than jewelry. It was an acknowledgement, a symbol of the partner he now saw in me. I nodded, unable to speak. He lifted the circlet and placed it gently on my brow. It was cool, and a strange, resonant hum seemed to pass from it into my very bones, as if welcoming me home. "It suits you," he murmured, his fingers brushing a stray hair from my temple. The touch lingered, and the air between us grew warm and charged. The bond sang, a harmony of respect, gratitude, and something deeper, something that had been growing in the quiet spaces between battles and councils. A frantic knock shattered the moment. Torrent entered, his face ashen. "The scouts from the Silver Plains have returned. Vexus is dead." A shock went through the room. "How?" Kaelin demanded. "Murdered. In his own locked study. No sign of a struggle, but his face. They say it was frozen in absolute terror." Torrent swallowed. "And carved on his desk was a symbol, a wolf's skull in thorns." The same symbol from my dream, from Kaelin's floor. "The master is clearing the board," I whispered, cold dread pooling in my stomach. "Removing the pawns who have outlived their usefulness." "Or sending a message," Kaelin said, his voice like ice. "He can reach anyone, anywhere. No one is safe." The next morning, the message became a declaration. A lone rider, his mind broken by terror, arrived at our gates clutching a scroll. It was an ultimatum, written on parchment that felt like dried skin. "King of Ashes, and your little weaver. You huddle in your stone nest, thinking you have won a battle. You have only delayed the inevitable. The age of wolves is ending. A new power rises from the deep places, and it hungers. You have 3 days. Surrender the soul weaver to me, and I will let your pack scatter to the winds. Fight, and I will paint your mountains with the blood of every man, woman, and pup who call you Alpha. The choice is yours." Then the Thorned King. Silence descended on the war council. The Thorned King. a title no one had heard, an enemy with no face. "We cannot fight what we do not know," one of the generals growled. "We do know," I said. Standing, all eyes turned to me, the moonstone circlet cool on my brow. "We know he fears us. Specifically, he fears what we are together. He fears the bond. He fears a united pack. That is his weakness. He seeks to divide, to terrorize, to make us feel alone. That is how he wins." Kalen looked at me, and a proud, fierce light burned in his eyes. "Then we show him he has failed." He turned to the council. "Send the riders to every pack, every alpha, every lone wolf in the northern reaches. Not a command from the King of Ashes, a call from the King and Queen of Shadowfen. The enemy does not seek to conquer one pack. It seeks to erase our kind. We stand together, or we fall alone. Gather at the Stone Plains in 2 days' time."
It was a gamble. Would the Alphas, many of whom still feared and resented Kalen, answer a call to united war? The response was not what we expected. It was more. They came not in dozens, but in hundreds. Not just warriors, but whole packs, elders, children, healers, driven from their homes by the spreading blight and shadow. They came to the vast stone plains, a sea of fearful, desperate faces, looking to the two figures standing on the central rock dais. Kalen stood before them, not in his full armor, but as their king. I stood beside him, the moonstone crown gleaming. He did not roar, he spoke, and his voice, amplified by the natural bowl of the plains, carried to the furthest listener. "For 15 years you have known me as the King of Ashes, a ruler of fear. I make no apologies for what I was. It was the shield that kept this kingdom from collapsing into the chaos my father left." He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "But a shield is also a wall. It protects, but it isolates. I isolated myself from you. I ruled alone, and in doing so, I made us weak to an enemy that thrives on division." He gestured to me. "This is Alara, my queen, my mate, and the last soul weaver of the Moon Shadow line. She has reminded me of a truth we have all forgotten. We are not just packs. We are a people. The enemy at our gates does not care if you are from the Snow Peak Pack or the River Run tribe. He seeks to end us all. He fears the bond between mates, the bond between packmates, the bond between all wolves. That is the power he cannot understand and must destroy." He extended a hand over the crowd. "I do not ask for your loyalty to me. I ask for your loyalty to each other, to our future. I ask you to stand not as subjects, but as allies, as one pack, under one sky, facing one enemy. Who will stand with us?" A silence hung, so heavy it could crush stone. Then, from the middle of the crowd, an old alpha with one eye stepped forward. He had challenged Kalen at the Circle of Elders. "I, Gron of the Snow Peak, will stand." His voice was a gravelly roar. Another alpha stepped forward. "I, Liana of the River Run, will stand." Then another and another. A wave of voices, not of forced obedience, but of chosen alliance, swept across the plains. It was a sound more powerful than any war cry, the sound of a fractured people becoming whole. As the cheers rose, Kalen's hand found mine. He didn't look at me, but his grip was firm, sure. Through the bond, I felt it all, the overwhelming relief, the crushing weight of new responsibility, and a love so profound and terrifying it stole my breath. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a clear, resonant truth. The Thorned King had sought to divide us. Instead, he had united a kingdom. The united packs transformed the Stone Plains into a sprawling, determined camp. The energy was no longer one of dread, but of grim purpose. Forges burned day and night. Scouts shared information freely. My role became clear. I moved among the people, not as a warrior, but as a weaver. I tended to frayed nerves, soothed the terror of children, and strengthened the bonds between packs who had been rivals for generations.
The silvery light of my magic became a familiar, comforting sight in the camp. On the evening of the second day, our scouts returned with the news we dreaded. An army was marching from the cursed, blighted lands to the far north. It was not an army of men, or even of wolves. It was a shambling, silent horde of creatures, corrupted beasts, twisted by dark magic, their eyes the same sickly violet as the Voidwalker. And at the head, riding a nightmare creature that was part wolf, part shadow, was a figure in armor of blackened, thorny metal, the Thorned King. He made no camp, he did not stop. His horde moved with a single, relentless purpose, towards us, towards the stone plains, towards us. This was it, the last stand. As the sun rose on the third day, we took our positions. Kalen, in his full obsidian armor, stood at the very front of our united lines. I stood on a raised platform behind the main force, surrounded by our healers and the elders. My job was not to fight, but to hold the weave, to be the anchor for the pack's spirit. The horde crested the distant ridge, a dark stain spreading across the land. The silence from their ranks was more frightening than any roar. Then the Thorned King raised a clawed hand and they charged. The battle was a chaos of snarls, screams, and the eerie silence of the corrupted. Our lines held, fighting with the ferocity of those defending their very existence. But for every corrupted beast felled, two seemed to take its place. And the Thorned King himself was a whirlwind of dark energy, cutting through our warriors, heading inexorably towards the center, towards Kalen. I watched, my heart in my throat, as the two kings clashed. It was not just a physical fight, it was a duel of essences. Kalen's shadow, the primal force of the hunt, met the Thorned King's consuming, parasitic darkness. They were evenly matched in power, but the Thorned King fought with a frenzied, desperate hate. He knew if he lost here, his centuries-old plot ended. I felt every blow Kalen took through the bond. Each one was a shock to my own system. I poured strength down our connection, my soul weaving magic feeding his will, reinforcing his spirit. But I could feel him tiring. The Thorned King's magic was leeching his strength, whispering despair. "You are alone." The whisper slithered through the bond, meant for Kalen, but I heard it too. "You have always been alone. The girl is a crutch. She will break and you will fall." A cold fury, purer than any I had ever known, ignited within me. He was wrong. We were not a king and his crutch. We were two halves of a shield, and I was not powerless. I closed my eyes and stopped sending strength just to Kalen. I cast my awareness out over the entire raging battlefield. I found the thousand threads of connection, mate to mate, parent to child, alpha to beta, warrior to the warrior beside them. I found the shared love for their homes, their fierce hope for their pups' futures, their stubborn, defiant will to survive. And I began to weave. I didn't fight the Thorned King's dark whispers. I drowned them out. I amplified the sound of a mother's lullaby remembered. I strengthened the memory of a first hunt succeeded. I wove the shared grief for fallen comrades into a vow of continued fight. I took the singular, lonely strength of Kalen Blackwood and connected it to the collective, mighty heart of his people. A silvery light, faint at first, then blazing, erupted from me. It didn't shoot across the battlefield. It suffused it, running along the threads of connection like lightning along a wire. Every wolf on our side suddenly blazed with that soft, moonlit glow. The effect was instantaneous. Weariness vanished. Wounds knit a fraction faster. Fear turned to burning resolve. They fought not as separate packs, but as a single, magnificent organism. The Thorned King screamed in rage, his power faltering. "What is this?" Kalen, bathed in the silvery light of our united people, straightened. His own shadowy power now burned with a core of brilliant silver. "This," he roared, his voice echoing with the strength of thousands, "is the pack."
With a final, devastating surge of combined power, his shadow, my light, the united will of every wolf on the field, Kalen struck. His blow shattered the Thorn King's thorny armor, piercing the darkness within. The Thorn King didn't cry out. He simply unraveled. His form dissipated, not into ash, but into a mournful, fading wind, revealing not a monster, but the withered, ancient form of a long-forgotten alpha from a pack that had chosen isolation and dark power over community centuries ago. His was the original, festering loneliness that sought to consume all others. With his fall, the corrupted horde shuddered and collapsed, the dark magic holding them together dissolving. Silence, profound and complete, fell over the stone plains. Then a single howl of victory rose from a warrior in the front. It was joined by another and another, until the very sky shook with the sound of a people liberated, united, and free. 1 year later, the sun warming the gardens of the obsidian fortress was a gentle, forgiving sun. The fortress itself had changed. The gates were still strong, but the grim skulls were gone, replaced by carvings of wolves running free under a full moon. Flowers now grew in terraces cut into the stone, and the laughter of children was the most common sound in the courtyards. I sat on a stone bench, watching. Lyra was here now, having come to live with us, her laughter brighter than the sun as she taught a group of pups from various packs how to track rabbits. Grandfather's spirit, I felt, was at peace. The bond between Kaylin and me was now a quiet, steady song, a conversation without words. I felt him approach before I saw him, a warm, solid presence at the edge of my awareness. He sat beside me, his movements easy and relaxed. The harsh lines of his face had softened. He was not just the King of Ashes anymore. He was Kaylin Blackwood, the king who rebuilt. "The emissary from the southern clans has agreed to the trade treaty," he said, lacing his fingers through mine, a simple, loving gesture that still sent a thrill through me. "They were impressed by the story of the Stone Plains. They call us the Sundered Pack no longer. They call us the United Kingdom." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "And the new settlement for the displaced families from the blighted lands?" "Breaking ground next week. They've asked if you'll come to bless the foundation." He smiled, a true, warm smile that reached his mercury eyes, now often touched with soft silver. "They say the soul weaver's touch makes the stone strong and the hearts stronger." We sat in comfortable silence, watching our world, the world we had built from sacrifice and choice, from shadow and light. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "Your old life, the simplicity?" I thought of the desperate fear, the constant hunger, the feeling of watching everything I loved slowly fade. Then I looked at him, at the fortress alive with hope, at my sister laughing, at our joined hands. "I didn't lose my old life, Kaylin," I said softly. "I found my purpose. I found my family. I found my heart. I found you." He lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, his eyes holding a love as deep and eternal as the mountains around us. "And I," he whispered, his voice full of a wonder that would never fade, "was a king of ashes until a moonlit soul came and showed me how to live in the light." In the garden, under the gentle sun, the Winter King and the Soul Weaver sat together, their bond a silent promise in the air. The war was over. The shadows had been banished, and a new, lasting dawn built on unity and love had finally begun. The end.